right, it's time for another show.
It's a good one. They're not electing Marcell.
Yeah,
it's going to come back to bite us. I'm telling you.
Yep.
Yeah, it could be. Well, he did pretty well. He got about 30% of the vote. I know he wanted.
Yeah, but there's only first place when it comes for office.
Right. When it comes to elections, you got one first place, and that is it. So with Marcell, 7:30, we'll get in touch with that. A couple of the dominating stories here in Ohio politics. We're going to talk about the Medicaid fraud. We'll get into some of that, too, which is dominating Ohio politics.
Just the cost of doing business, Joe. Just the cost of doing business.
Just the cost of doing business. And DeWine, we're trying to throw him under the bus. So all we need is a
Massey's
bigger
starting
bus.
to sound like a governor.
Who's that?
I said Brian Massey's starting to sound like a governor. It's a couple $1 billion, whatever. It's the cost of doing business.
It's a rounding error.
Yeah. And that's on the low side too, a couple billion. It could be north of that, okay? If you talk to Mike Davila, a state rep there out of the Strongsville area, he'll say it's probably north of that, okay? Let's see what else we have here. So we'll be talking with him. By the way, I want you to this story. I know you guys never heard of this guy, Stephen Colbert. You ever hear of him? He's on a late night show.
Sure.
You have, okay. You have heard of him.
Yeah.
I guess we have heard of him. Has anybody ever watched his show? I don't think anyone.
No, never. They said he was a comedian, but honestly, I've never laughed at anything he said. I don't know why.
He never said anything funny. He's a comedian, but he never said anything funny. Well, Trump had the last word here. He just did his last show. Colbert just did his last show. Thank God.
Welcome back to our final broadcast, ladies and gentlemen.
There you go. There he goes.
It's AI. It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, I don't think that was AI. I think that was real, Brian. I'm pretty sure that was.
That was not AI generated. That could not have possibly have been AI generated.
No.
That was the real thing right there. That's the real thing. Yeah, when you got this guy. But
it's pretty creative. Very creative.
So CBS described the cancellation as purely a financial decision. He was losing $40 to $50 million a year.
Oh, $40 to
$50 million.
They could make that up with Medicare fraud. Really?
So when
but that's the cost of propaganda. The left want propaganda. They peddle it like crazy. So for them, there've been a bunch of those. Who's the other one? Late night guy that's
Jimmy Kimmel.
Off a few times. Jimmy Kimmel.
Yeah,
he keeps getting kicked off. As far as we can tell, he has no audience. Nobody follows him. But he's out there peddling propaganda and leftist nonsense. And so the people that are willing to fund that to try to get America to pay attention to the propaganda and buy into the leftist narrative, they're willing to shell out big money and have these losing TV shows. It's crazy. From our generation, we always thought of you only air the TV shows that are profitable, that make money, that people want, that are interesting. But it's a new world now that propaganda exists in the U.S. They're willing to go negative and have these. I guess they think of them as loss leaders or something. They're like, whatever, we'll write off $40 million of loss.
They were probably getting some audience. They were probably getting financial aid from USAID. It's probably what they were doing.
Yeah.
That's how they
probably take our taxpayer dollars and funnel it into the propaganda.
Well,
but I think people are waking up to that.
Yeah, the only thing that Colbert ever did really was he just bashed Trump. That's what he was notorious for, just bashing Trump. He called him a skinhead. He called him, he said, there's more people marching against you than cancer. He said, you are like a sign language gorilla that got hit in the head. And then he, some very vulgar statements, sexual vulgar statements he made on the air. The FCC got involved in it. Nothing ever happened about it, but it was very crude sexual references to Trump. And then when Trump
that's just a measure of the man. That's just a measure of the man, as far as I'm concerned.
That's why nobody ever thought this guy was funny. He didn't say anything funny. He was nothing. He claims that he was a comedian. He was no comedian. Come on, this guy is.
Welcome back to our.
This guy is not a comedian. Throw him in the trash.
But they're all doing the same thing. You got Saturday Night Live and Jimmy Kimmel and all of them. They apparently just exist to soak up money, which probably comes from taxpayer funding, to just spin anti-American leftist propaganda. It's time to just cut all of them off. Let's go back to television that's entertaining, that people actually want to watch. That's not leftist propaganda. How about that? How about going back to actual television that's interesting, that people might want to watch?
Yeah, it's a novel concept right there. Yeah, at least have the comedian be funny. And I thought Jay Leno was pretty funny. And I think Johnny Carson in his prime was the absolute best. I mean, that guy, he didn't take anything, and you just laughed. I mean, even when the jokes would fall flat, he would make you laugh, because they wouldn't go over
just
right.
His reaction to
his
the
reactions
jokes,
and everything to it, you just started laughing. It was funny. Sometimes it was funnier when the jokes didn't go over well than when they did go over well. But yeah,
who's currently
good.
currently like that? What's his name? His last name's Harvey. He did the Family Feud recently.
Steve Harvey.
Steve Harvey. Yeah, I couldn't remember his first name for a minute. Every once in a while I get little clips. Sometimes that Family Feud is hilarious. But he's a natural-born comedian. His reactions, his timing, when he just looks at the camera and raises one eyebrow, that goes back to the day of just kind of, well, I won't call him classy, because some of the suits he wore are outrageous. Like bright velvet purple suits and stuff. He did that for effect. But he had good comedic timing. That guy's funny. Somebody like him should be late night TV. Not this Kimmel and Stephen Colbert. Those guys are just,
they're not.
they are
I think the
leftist
late
mouthpieces only.
Wouldn't you agree the late night comedians are gone now? I mean, you think they'll ever come back?
I don't think so.
I don't know. Maybe they could bring back a variety show.
It's a different day and age, guys. It's a different day and age, and they used to. What Colbert was doing is the same thing Johnny Carson was doing, and David Letterman and everything. The same type of a stage and all that. It's just it got old. It's not keeping up with the times. Plus, you got to have some jokes that are kind of funny. All right, we got
a new idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's my new idea. I think we should have an offshoot of Ohio political news. It's like the Gong Show for politics. Let's do that. Let's bring back the Gong Show, and we'll just comment on the ridiculous moves of some of our politicians, our representatives, I'm air quoting that, and just have a giant gong with a huge mallet, and every once in a while, when they're super ridiculous, just go and clang the gong. How about that?
Jonathan, I kind of like that. I like that idea. Joe and I were talking about Jerry Serino said my press conference seemed like a Saturday Night Live skit. So Joe and I said, well, maybe we could have a high political news with the Monday night, make it a Monday Night Live skit. The Gong Show would work just as well. We could have some of these politicians, and Jerry Serino could be our first one. As he's starting to blather on, we'll just bring out the gong and oust him from the stage.
We could put a real gong right where that lobbyist for citizens is behind you. That board. We're going to put a real gong right there. You're going to stand up once in a while and just boing and boing.
Yeah. I think that'd be pretty fun when they do terrible things.
All right, we got $1.2 billion in excess money, guys. Tax surplus here in Ohio. I want to find out what we're going to do with it. So Ohio is a projected $1.2 billion surplus for 2026. That's according to Governor Mike DeWine's budget of management department.
That's about 10
What do you think the odds are that the money will go back to the taxpayer?
I don't know.
No,
I don't know. We'll have to find out.
Never, ever do that. But what is it? 1.7. That's. I think that's
okay. Here, I'll tell you what's going on here real quick. We got 1.2 this year. $1.2 billion surplus. Last year, we had $1.3 billion. A lot of people didn't know about that. I'm just reading about it now. $1.3 billion last year, $1.2 billion this year. We got $2.5 billion sitting around. Somebody's sitting on a lot of cash there. So personal income tax makes up 60% of it. Sales tax, 40%. Now, the big question for you guys is, what do we do with that extra money? So what should we do with... All right, that's a good...
I agree with Jonathan. Yeah.
Yeah, because
I would love to get. I would
it,
love to have it back too. I mean, come on, it's our money, right? It's our money.
we know
Now,
it won't happen, but so if it went back to the people, and you have people that feed our economy, they're going to go out and buy stuff, go to stores, interact with people, use the money to buy things, which then feeds the economy. That would actually make way too much sense. So what the politicians are likely to do with it is figure out some array of people that haven't had a brand new car in government for 2 years. So they'll oh, woe is me. I've been in this government branch with that's way overstaffed with our $240,000 a year administrative staff. And gosh, I'm driving this nearly 2-year-old vehicle. And so what they'll do is they'll just buy new vehicles for everybody in some department. And then, so that'll be the starting point. And then I'm sure a few people will have to have new buildings because maybe their building is 6 years old or something. Oh, heck, gosh, heaven forbid. So that's what happens. It's just a parade of nonsense. In education, I call it ABE, which stands for anything but education. In government, it's anything but helping the people. We can't possibly fill in the potholes or get back to educating children or helping to try and make people healthy, because heaven forbid, that would mean that the problem would be solved and we could stop running up the tab on over $100 billion a year state budget. So
yeah, the state
no,
budget
they're not going to give it back.
$100 billion a year right now, and apparently they collected 102 billion, something like that. So they've got excess cash on hand. We need to monitor that money because we don't know what the. If you had $1 billion, what would you do, Brian?
Well,
help the people.
Yeah,
as a politician,
what I would if they're not going to send it directly to the taxpayers in the form of a tax credit one way or another, I would add it to the local government fund so it goes back to the local government so that maybe, just maybe, there's a chance that the local government may do something with the property taxes, so it gives it back to the people, or they're paying for police and fire as opposed to another levy that takes money away from the people. So I would say, number one, you give it back to the people directly, or two, you give it to the local government fund so it can be distributed to the communities.
We came close to that some years ago. I lived in Lyndhurst, which is a community in Cuyahoga County, not far from Cleveland. In Lyndhurst, our local city councilman, Josh Mandel, who went on to serve in the Capitol later, Josh Mandel recognized a surplus at the city level in the city of Lyndhurst and actually fought for and advocated for a return to the taxpayers. Well, the other people in city leadership in the city of Lyndhurst just thought that was outrageous and fought him on it. I don't think we got anything back. I don't remember the exact outcome. If we did, it was a tiny fraction of what he had intended. But that was one of the first times when Josh Mandel really showed up on my radar. Like, wow, that's refreshing. There's somebody that actually gets it. But here's one of the things to keep in mind so politicians and our legislature in Columbus, Ohio, look at these things like $1.2 billion, and they're like, they're so used to rubber stamping anything and absolutely everything that passes through. How fast can we spend taxpayer dollars seems to be the formula, that they become blinded to the impact of things like $1.2 billion of overcharging. That's overcharging. For heaven's sakes, we've gotten so ridiculous. We went off the rails years ago. Back when our state budget was $67 billion, that was crippling. That was crushing Ohio at $67 billion. We've gone up to over $100 billion with nothing to show for it. I can't find a thing that we, the people, have to show for it. And on top of that, they over collected. So the people in our state legislature, the people in Columbus, don't recognize or are willfully oblivious to the fact that that's what's leading to hardship, homelessness, financial struggle. It's ludicrous that we have people that have achieved high office and are sitting in our legislature who don't realize that that $1.2 billion is directly responsible for some number of people losing their farms, forced out of their homes, can't afford proper groceries or to feed themselves. That's the result. I'm facing it at the county level. In the county where I live, in Geauga County, we have a roughly 40% increase in the amount of money that we're bringing in. There's so much money coming in from overtaxing people. And yet, we have people at the county level who are exceeding that amount with dramatically increased spending. So they're spending faster than we can bring in the 40% increase. That's happening at the state level, at the county level. Yeah. It's absolute insanity. And these people will look at you like, and we have all these examples that I point to and use, which just draws the ire of the woke left. But just recently, we rubber stamped a $400,000 office renovation for our county prosecutor. And I went in and asked the question in the commissioners meeting, county commissioners, who needs a $400,000 office? What are you even talking about? What is that? In the face of hardship and struggle and a 30% increase on property taxes, why on earth? And then they want to build a new Taj Mahal library, and they just finished building a big Taj Mahal giant, looks like a brick, new courthouse. So anybody connected with government apparently can have a stretch Cadillac Escalade limousine and live in a $400,000 office and work there and have a $200,000 a year annual salary for 10 hours a week or whatever they do. It's insanity. They're struggling to try and creatively come up with ways of spending money fast enough.
That is the point, though. Yeah, that's the point. I
bankrupt
think
us.
Yeah. They got $1.2 billion, and they're not going to give it back to us. They're going to find a way to spend it.
No, they're going to find a way to burn through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jonathan, I agree. I found something in Lake County, in Lake Tran. It's sales tax more than the property tax, but I found out that Lake Tran has over $50 million in cash reserves. And so I have asked them to consider a 0.25% reduction of the sales tax for a period of time, be it 6 months or 12 months. But I keep telling everybody, you got to get the money back in the hands of the taxpayers. This inflation rate is just killing everybody. And they're supposed to, they haven't given me a decision yet, but I will ask them, I'll ask the board, Brian Falkowski's and the head of the board, I'm going to ask him what his decision is, and we will let the people know how Lake Tran thinks about the average citizens in Lake and Geauga County.
Absolutely. Let us know about that when you find out about it, Brian. And also, we got Marcell Strbich coming on here in just a minute. But June 5th, you're going to give us an update on the number of signatures you have, official tally on the number of signatures to abolish property taxes, right?
And Ohio Political News will have the exclusive, Joe. You're going to interview me, and we're going to tell everybody if we're going to put it on the ballot for November 2026, or are we going to continue collecting signatures through 2027. All of the signatures that we have are still valid and can be carried forward. Do not listen to any of the naysayers that want to demoralize the people and say that if we don't turn them in July 1st, all of the signatures we have collected to date will be invalid, and that is just not true. Those are liars and deceivers.
Hey, I got one quick question for you, because I had a bit of an argument with one guy, and he was saying that it goes by, I said, if people move, then that signature would be null and void. Is that true, or does it not matter if you move? It's where you were at.
Wherever they registered again? Have they re-registered?
Yeah, if they re-register, they've got to redo the signature. It's got to be that way.
Yes.
Yeah, there's no way the board... He was trying to tell me the board is going to go back and look at that time frame, whether it was a year or two earlier, and see where they lived and match it up. And that's BS. You know that ain't going to happen. That is not going to happen. No. There's no way. There's no way that would even come close to happening. Okay, we got an ID battle exploding here ahead of the 2026 election. A constitutional ID battle, and we want to get into that a little bit here. Let me get Marcell over on with us here tonight. How you doing, Marcell?
Good to be with you, my friends.
Good to see you. Good to see you. So this whole voter ID thing, the Republican parties are pushing a proposed constitutional amendment that would permanently require photo ID for voting in Ohio elections by putting the requirement directly into the Ohio Constitution. The proposal was introduced in May through House Joint Resolution 9 and Senate Joint Resolution 10. Okay, so on the surface, because we're going to discuss this a little bit, on the surface, that sounds pretty darn good. We're going to actually require everybody to show an ID to vote, but that's not really exactly what took place there. Hey, I got this off. Let me play this. This is actually you, but you summed it up real well. Then I'm going to come back to you live, okay?
I do not support the current version of this constitutional amendment. Why? Because it limits photo ID requirements in Ohio for voters to only in-person voting. It completely leaves the door open to voters continually voting by mail and absentee without a photo ID. We should not be codifying that deficiency in the Ohio Constitution. So the language of the amendment has to change.
All right, so we're going to go from Marcell to Marcell. Marcell, do you agree with Marcell?
Well, yes, I mean, considering the fact that in this state, roughly 20 to 25% of people vote without having to show a photo ID, why would we just lift and shift the defective voter ID law that we passed that opened that loophole up in 22? And now why would we codify it in the Constitution, Joe? Because here's what happens. You write a resolution like this, it sounds great to voters, but the vast majority of voters can't distinguish the difference between voter ID and photo ID. By design, they can't distinguish it, right? And so you have these arguments form where people say, and this here, it says in this resolution, this shall include a requirement that an elector show photo ID when voting in person. But the very nature of not saying it for what absentee or mail-in ballots sets the stage to deny or inhibit future legislators from being able to then pass a law to close the loophole. So I think it's important we provide some context and not just look at this from the standpoint of this resolution in and of itself, right? Because this resolution has political merit, but it lacks substantive merit. What I'm talking about is in the very same committee where this resolution is going forward, because joint resolutions have been put forward now in the Senate General Government Committee and in the House General Government Committee, there is a bill to rectify the voter ID deficiency in Ohio called HB 577, which I gave proponent testimony for just a month ago that was sponsored by Representative Ron Ferguson. And so the idea with that is let's go back and clean up what we didn't clean up properly right in that post-COVID period, and let's require equal application of the law, fairness, that everybody has to present a photo ID. And to come up with ways to do that will be the Secretary of State's role. But the idea here is that committee ignored and is allowing that bill to die while at the same time professing they're going to push this resolution forward so that we all vote on this, pretending that this is going to somehow close the entire photo ID loophole in Ohio. So it's a ruse in that sense that we have to change this language. There's another thing with this bill. Not only would it inhibit the ability of future legislation to close the photo ID loophole, it opens the door in the future to legislators passing digital ID or mobile driver's licenses to voting. What do I mean by that? Go to Section 4 on the back of it. It says, another document authorized by the General Assembly by law for use as photo identification for voting purpose. Why would you put that in there unless you wanted legislators in the future to define a photo ID beyond something physical, something that we present? So to me, I call this clause the photo ID escape hatch clause. And in it, this essentially says that a future legislation can replace this entire thing with digital ID if they wanted to.
All right, let me ask you a couple questions here first, and just here, I'll tell you what. Give me a yes or no, just so I can understand this better. And I got a couple quick fire type questions here. So this is all about presenting a valid photo ID, correct?
It's not. It's limiting valid presentation of photo ID to only in-person voters.
Okay, all right. Let's stop right there. I got you. Okay, so the photo ID is only if you go in person. That's correct. That's right. So if you go in person, you have to show a photo ID. So that's what we're talking about here. But it's still a photo ID that you have to show, right? Primarily. Okay. Now, The problem is when you do mail-in voting, correct? When you do those mail-in ballots, you don't have to show an ID, a photo ID at all. And that's where the loophole is, right?
It is, and you have to think about this day and age. If you are voting by mail or remote, you're going to effectively just have to provide a social security number or a driver's license. Somebody else could be providing that information without your knowledge. And that's very plausible today because of the way that personally identifiable information is available. So there's a problem with protecting our ballot and our vote so that somebody doesn't impersonate our information and submit that without our knowledge. And then number two, there's an equal application of the law, okay? And that is a principle going back to the Declaration of Independence, okay? We are all equal. And so if we're all going to be voting, we all have to have equal voting methods, okay? I don't care about the convenience argument. We've had convenience without security for so long at this point. And if the convenience was such a priority, why isn't there any federal law that talks about voting convenience? There isn't. We came up with that construct.
It makes no sense.
Protect the ultimate fundamental rights.
It makes absolutely no sense that you're voting. You are voting. And then there's going to be two criteria, one for when you go in person and a different one for when you're going to do it through mail-in balloting. That shouldn't be. That's so dumb. The state doesn't know anything but how to do stupid stuff sometimes. How can you have two different How can you have two different criteria for voting? That makes no sense.
It's by design. They don't want to close that. They don't want to have to make the case. Even though this is something they can apply within the bill that's before them. By the way, if they pass this, or we pass this, because the legislature doesn't want to pass it, they're going to make the voters do it so we can come out and vote in November. But if we do pass this, there's no teeth here. There's no teeth because they don't have a statute ready to go other than the one that we submitted to them. Ron Ferguson submitted that the Speaker of the House, Matt Hoffman, does not want to allow forward. Have you ever heard of something like that? We only got one shot to do this. And it seems like we're willing to shoot ourselves in the foot on this. Because if you can't legislate in the future photo ID, which is if this language doesn't change, this is why I'm going on Wednesday to give opponent testimony. Not that I don't agree in principle. I do agree in principle that we should enshrine photo ID if it includes 100% of it for all voting methods in the Constitution. I agree with that. But I don't agree with the way they wrote this because this will tie our hands. This will open the door to digital ID mobile driver's licenses in the future, and then you're going to not even have to vote in person ever. Okay, this is an escape hatch approach.
Okay, and, Marcell, one thing here. All right, one thing, because you've read it and you're more versed on it than we are. So please explain again how this opens the door to digital ID. Could you please?
Well, let's look at the language. In the first section, it says electors shall provide identification in order to vote in accordance with laws passed by the General Assembly. That sounds good, right? Except here's the problem. What do you mean by identification? Is it voter identification or photo ID identification? It needs to say shall provide photo identification in order to vote. And then it needs to not say anything else after this. It needs to not say the law shall include a requirement that electors show photo ID when voting in person at a polling place, because that's creating a differentiator. That's creating a situation where that's the only application of where the Ohio Constitution cares about a photo ID. It doesn't care if you vote by mail or if you vote by absentee. It only cares in person. So simpler is better. Keep it simple, right? Electors shall provide photo identification in order to vote. If all that this resolution said was that, and then it's specified on the back for purposes of this section, photo identification means one of the following: a driver's license, state ID card, a United States passport or passport card, a U.S. military identification card. That's all this thing needs to say. None of this other crap in here. None of this another document authorized by the General Assembly by law for use as photo ID. We don't need to open the escape hatch to walk away from this for somebody else. This thing needs to be revised. Otherwise, I'm not supporting it. I wouldn't advise anybody to support it because we're shooting ourselves in the foot. We'll not be able to close a photo ID deficit in the future. And I really hope our leaders are listening, and I really hope they realize that the real solution is to pass HB 577, because otherwise this thing is just a piece of paper.
So HB 577 requires photo ID even if you're doing mail-in balloting, correct? If you're doing mail-in balloting,
a copy front and back of a state-issued unexpired ID. And it's willing to have Board of Election members come to people who are mobility restricted homes, issue them the ID, and give them, through a mobile printing device, a copy that they can put inside of their absentee envelope. I mean, it fully addresses all of the things that in 2022 were used as an excuse to exempt photo ID for mail-in ballots. We got it covered this time. And yet still the chairman of this committee, Sharon Ray, continues to pontificate about this idea that there's still voter ID because people can submit a social security number or a driver's license. Yes, my neighbor can literally steal or purchase my driver's license and social security number and vote in my name, Sharon Ray. Yes, they can.
Oh, we've seen how that can be manipulated. The 4 last digits of a social security number and everything else be easily manipulated. Yeah, but you can't manipulate it.
39,000 social security numbers came back in this last poll by the Social Security Administration for Ohio social security numbers that came back mismatched, 37,000 of them. So 94%. Tell me, do people just not know the last 4 of their social security number? That to me is an indicator we have a problem. And that's why we need photo ID for all methods.
Yeah, and like you said, anybody can put down those numbers, but you can't cheat when you go in person. You cannot cheat if you go in person because you got to show an ID. But Brian, we're discriminating against so many people because we're requiring them to show an ID when they vote by mail.
What's interesting to me, we try to make it, as Marcell says, easy to vote. You know, that's we've got to make it real easy to vote. We try to make it easy to vote, but we still only get, 20, 30% maybe of the registered voters to vote?
Right.
I'm not sure that's really working all that well. I agree with Marcell that it's got to be consistent with pictures, a photo ID for ballot. I'm not a big believer in the ballots, other than for military personnel that are overseas or maybe in the nursing home. But it should be rare and not just the general rule, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Because it hasn't helped. It has not helped the number of people that are actually. The voter turnout percentage is still terrible.
Here's 2 things to deflate our opponents' arguments, right? When they said we instituted a photo ID for in-person voting, they said, oh, that's going to create an undue burden on people. We did not have lower amount of people voting the following subsequent elections. So it didn't drop off precipitously. So it never came into fruition. Then the same argument was made about this recent pass of a law that says that any ballots received after Election Day, even if they were postmarked prior to Election Day, we're not going to count. And people said, oh my gosh, you're going to disenfranchise all these people who submitted it, ignoring the fact that people had 28 days to get their ducks in a row and that the cutoff would be 7 days by the Secretary of State. And now we just conducted our election, this primary, and I don't hear a single thing about a bunch of people getting disenfranchised because of the grace period going away. So to me, this is all much ado about nothing in terms of the disenfranchisement argument that always gets thrown out there. And at the end of the day, it's unfair for us to have multiple standards for people who vote, one way or the other. If you want to put aside the security argument for a second, the possibility of being able to fake somebody's information and register and vote for them, put that aside. There's a fairness argument here, and it really comes back to our Constitution.
Yeah, there cannot be 2 different ways for voting. It makes no sense. Come on. It's so ridiculous. Show some ID so we know that the guy is real. Like Jonathan here.
Absolutely.
You are AI generated, but when you go to vote, you have to show an ID. I don't actually
exist. I'm just thoroughly AI generated. But I will say I do get to vote as many times as I want in every election. No, actually, that's not true. I'm not voting on the Democrat side. So a few things to cover. Welcome back on the show, Marcell Strbich. The first thing is you talk about this figure of around 25-ish% of people in each election that don't vote in person. They're either absentee or mail-in or whatever, Dropbox. It is the expectation of the left, the people that hate America, that number should increase. You can see them actively pushing for it. So to say that around 1/4 of people do not have to show ID is currently true, But if the left have their way, then that number continues to increase. And pretty soon it's 40, 50, 60, 70, 90% of people. That's what the left want, because that is a breeding ground for just mass confusion and chaos in our elections and unaccountability and all kinds of badness. So that's one point. The other thing, I'm reminded of something that's happening in the state of Michigan right now. And this will really touch a note, I'm sure, with Brian Massey. In Michigan, there's all kinds of big flashy headlines about their legislature working to abolish property taxes. And I'm air quoting that. When you actually look at it, and that's the headline, like, ooh, wow, cool. The Michigan legislature is going to abolish property taxes. But you look at it, and it's this little tiny breadcrumb microcosm of if this cap doesn't apply, then there's some 6% that might apply to property taxes, and they're going to do away with that maybe, and it really has very little impact. It is very far from actually abolishing property taxes. My point in bringing that up is there's all kinds of political shenanigans that are done between our politicians in Columbus, Ohio, and their mouthpieces in the media, who put out these splashy headlines like, yay, look at us, we're going to make it obligatory to present ID. And most people are busy. They only read the headline and they think, oh, well, great. They must be doing their job then. It takes people like Marcell Strbich to read through and figure out what's actually happening and get the truth out there. So just like Michigan needs to fight back against the little trinket breadcrumb that they're trying to throw to confuse Michigan voters who are not in the pipeline to get an abolishment of property taxes. In the same way, they're not doing anything good or productive. And I agree with Marcell. I've taken some time to look. I wish we could actually bring up side by side and actually show the proposed legislation. Joe, I don't know if you have that handy. And Marcell can pick it apart.
Well,
He's done a great job in these videos.
Here. All right. Well, where do I find it? Because I could search the internet while you guys are talking or something. Where is it at? Where's it located? Anybody know?
If you go to HJR number 9 at the 136th General Assembly, and you plug that into whatever search bar, you should be able to get it. I mean, the sponsors are Workman, Heidi Workman, and Adam Bird. And in there, you'll be able to find the document and just pull it up as a face. But while you're looking for that, I just want to point something out. Since we instituted our half-measure voter ID law back in 22, which excludes mail-in and absentee ballots from photo ID, 2.18 million Ohioans have voted without a photo ID. Think about that. That's 2.18 million risk points that we have allowed through our system to assume that everybody was submitting their information and it wasn't somebody on their behalf or someone who acquired or stole their information. And that is what this legislature, whether they realize it or not, is about to enshrine in the Constitution, something you're not going to change ever again on photo ID. I mean, that is playing fast and loose. Either you simplify this and you say electors shall provide photo ID in order to vote, and then pass this assembly or next assembly, but I would say this assembly because you're never going to get back to doing this. I already know that. I already know the game that's played. Do it now, pass it the right way, close the photo ID loophole, be done with it, and let the Secretary of State spend the next 90 days to come up with procedures that afford everybody to have the equal method of voting. It's that simple, guys, but they don't think it's simple. This is a very hard thing for them because this is so political for them. It's a control thing. So,
all right, so we have this, Marcell. We have this. Where do I go from here to look at the actual
wording? Go to the
wording?
amendment PDF. It's right there under current version. Pull it up.
As introduced PDF.
Click on the PDF right there, Joe, under current version to the right of Heidi Workman's face.
That one.
Right here?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, definitely got to make it bigger.
Got to make it bigger, and for some reason the resolution's coming across rough.
Yeah,
it looks pretty good for me. I'm able to read it.
Tell me which, basically, where do we want to go?
Just
we
go
can't
to section
read the whole
5, the
thing.
first line. Go to the first line. Go back up to the first page here. There you go. First page. Go down to Article 5. This is what's going to change in the Constitution, right? What this language says, what's going to go in there. Section 5 says, Electors shall provide identification in order to vote in accordance with laws passed by the General Assembly. That is effectively status quo. What they're saying is the laws as they stand today will be enshrined in the Constitution. And as I just explained, those laws are defective because they unequally treat categories of voters for the presentation of photo ID. So that needs to change to say shall provide photo identification in order to vote. Everything else after by the General Assembly needs to be deleted in that section. Delete the entire thing all the way down to as otherwise provided in divisions A, 2, and 3 of this section. The rest of it, you got to go back down to the second page under number 4, B4. B4, which would be lines 39 and 40.
Yeah, right there.
That's the escape hatch clause. That basically says, yeah, today might be photo ID, physical photo ID, but in the future, we're okay if the legislature passes laws to changes the definition of photo ID for voting purposes. So I interpret that to mean what the industry provides today. An industry provides digital ID, mobile driver's licenses, and I'm well aware that they already tried to pass that bill in Ohio for voting purposes or checking in for voting last year called HB 78. It was Todd Hall and it was Gary Click. What's interesting is the sponsor of this bill, Rep. Workman, was the vice chair of the committee that came through. And she was quick to ask hard questions about that, but now she's sponsoring this. So, you know, what's changed? Why are we now all of a sudden flirting with this idea of changing the definition of photo ID and putting it in our Constitution at that?
No, that's a real good point. Yeah. Nobody reads this stuff. Unfortunately,
It's the first problem we have.
People don't. Like, you know, average everyday citizens don't really read what's going on here.
I have a curiosity question here, and maybe Marcell knows the answer to this. And even if you don't, I think it's relevant. I have a smartphone. I'm one of the Android people. I have an Android smartphone, and there's by making a gesture or holding two keys at the same time, I can do a screen capture. It just takes an image capture of whatever's on the screen, with extremely rare exception. So this whole thing of photo ID, and I'm opposed to it. I work on the finance side. I'm focused on centralized banking, digital currency, and all those kinds of just horrible, destructive mayhem. I'm fighting that stuff, but those two are related. My question is, if I or anybody else are presented with some sort of photo ID that is digital, that's on your phone, it seems to me very reasonable that people can duplicate that and just share it around easily. I do it all the time. If I get some sort of image, it's an interesting post or meme or something like that, I push two buttons, I can send it to my wife and say, hey, check it out, this is pretty funny. Why, if we're trying to button up security around our elections, which we absolutely should be doing, and as a side note, anybody, and I get it all the time, I'm still getting it from people on the left, like, what are you talking about? There's no area, there's no vector for fraud or abuse in the elections. I just keep pointing people back to that. It's a roughly 19-minute video of everybody from the left, all the left, Amy Klobuchar, Hillary Clinton, it's a parade of people on the left in the political spectrum, all saying we cannot trust our elections. So just silence those people by showing them that video. But back to my question, if I've got some digital ID on my phone, I mean, it seems to me if I wanted to just harm myself, I could just share that around, and then thousands of people could have the very same digital photo ID that I have for myself. And then who's to decide who gets to vote? It just seems wildly insecure. I wonder if that's something you've come across, Marcell.
Yes, when the legislature tried to push HB 78 and it had a clause in there that it would have permitted mobile driver's licenses to be used when checking in at a polling location for voting, I quickly went to ask the question, so how do we check people in when they come into a precinct polling location? We use something called an e-poll book for most counties. And this is an iPad, which is already preloaded with voter information that aids the poll worker in determining if that person's information, what they have on file, matches whatever they're presenting them in terms of an identity, right? A physical photo ID. Well, if you show up and you hold your phone up to the person and says, this is me, okay, this is who I am, all right, I'm here to vote today, there's no interoperability between the technology of that poll book to be able to determine and authenticate whether this beautiful little girl here is the real voter involved. All right. So my point is, what they're really trying to do is create a new market for identity verification. These vendors, they realize that these credit cards are so compromised at this point. They're spending billions of dollars compensating people, and they want to shift the collateral and risk onto the consumer, onto, in this case, the voter. Because if my personal identifiable information is stolen, my biometrics at some point, which is what is going to be the basis of digital ID, then they're not responsible for having to reimburse us. That means they can save $50 billion across an entire industry, and we become the collateralized risk, our data. So it's a very crafty move to get everybody onto this system, except the problem is, who's going to house our biometric information? Where is that going to go? What guardrails are going to exist? And if it's stolen or it's housed on a foreign server, how are we going to enforce or know that it's been compromised? Because once your biometrics are compromised, your iris scan, your thumbprint, whatever it is that's used, you're done. It's not like you can go get a new plastic card. And so I don't think people see the second and third order effects of convenience in the age of technology. And I'm just literally trying to bring these guys to understand, because this is my background as an intel officer who's done the assessments of the threat technology here, that we haven't even brought ourselves up to speed with 10 years ago standards. So this is one of those things where this is going to be industry pushing its agenda and interest, and I don't see really most legislators being able to understand or ask really hard questions of this, or to be able to actually secure our information down the road.
So when we have the Democrats, okay, the Democrats are against this, okay? Now, let me just sort all this out here for a minute, because we have the Republicans pushing a constitutional amendment change so that you have to have photo ID when you vote in person, which we already do in Ohio, but this would solidify it into the Constitution. The Democrats don't want it. They've come out against it, saying it's unnecessary, it's not needed. But there's also a third opinion here, which is the opinion you're bringing up, and that is that you don't want it because that photo ID is going to be entrenched into the Constitution, that you never have to use it for mail-in balloting. And I think that's the whole discussion.
Yeah, but I would only contend one point with you, Joe. The Democrats don't mind this. They don't mind this because this is the Republicans using a silver bullet. They're going to have a backdoor, and one day they hope, and through a constitutional amendment actually, because they have something lined up called the Voter Bill of Rights, they're already lined up to make mobile digital driver's licenses an adequate form of identity verification when going to vote in person. And again, as you can see from the language in the back, that the legislature can choose an alternative to what photo ID means, that should make the Democrats very happy because that sets them up. Let's talk about what else makes the Democrats very happy. The Democrats can't do anything in the fact that the law says that you have to have a photo ID to vote by person. But if you listen to the Democrats, they're always encouraging people to vote early and not necessarily to vote in person. So their preferred method is not to have a photo ID in the primary arena where their people are going to be voting in this way. Okay, and so they would be very happy with this passing, in my opinion. Now they're going to scream and do all the things that they do because they're running for Secretary of State, and they got to make this look like the Republicans are disenfranchising, and they got to make their donors happy. But in reality, if I was a Democrat, I'd say this is all they got. This is great. Let them push this out. I guess the only thing they don't like is that this is being used at the time of an election, because inevitably there's 3.5 million independent voters, and they're going to see this. And like most people, like you said, Joe, in the beginning, they're going to say, yeah, sure, I agree with voter ID in the Constitution. It's a small fraction of people like us that really know what this is in the game that's being played here between these two sides.
So you think it's a game that's being played. Brian, you have
I've got another question.
Jonathan?
Oh, go ahead, Brian. Well, if I can throw this question in, we're talking, sorry to step on your toes there. I think hopefully it's a quick question. We're talking about roughly 20 to 25% of ballots go in as absentee or mail-in ballots. Do you have a breakdown of Democrat versus Republican? Instinct tells me that the Republican mail-in and absentee are going to be lower and Democrat are probably higher, because I think it seems to be the Democrat Party in particular is pushing in that direction. How does that break out? Do you happen to have those numbers handy?
I'm glad you asked me that. I do happen to have those numbers handy. Having assessed the 2024 Ohio U.S. Senate race, absentee ballot breakout by party affiliation, the Democrat average for absentee ballots, remember this is the Bernie Moreno, Sherrod Brown, the guy's name is Kissick, who ran, I think, as an independent. The Democrat average for absentee when analyzing the 33 counties that were able to provide, including urban and rural counties, because you know that those tend to go along party lines, 22% was the Democrat average absentee vote in those counties. The Republican average was 12% of the vote. So almost, you can see almost a 2-to-1 difference in Democrats in our analysis in terms of the makeup. And these are counties that were analyzed, included Lucas, Cuyahoga, which always is the anomaly when it comes to mail and absentee ballots. I think they had 43,000 this cycle. Even Franklin, with equal population, comes in like a 1/3 of the amount of mail-in or absentee ballots typically every election. So it goes to show you, yes, there is a difference and a big disparity if we're at least looking at some of those top line races in terms of who votes by mail, absentee, and who's predominant in the in-person category.
Go over to Brian here. Brian, you got a question?
Yeah, I've got a question for Marcell. In the voter registration, when they register to vote, what is Ohio doing as far as ensuring that they are a U.S. citizen? What do we require for the state of Ohio?
Well, today there is no proof of citizenship registration requirement when somebody fills out a registration application, whether that be electronically or by paper. They simply say they are or they're not. So it's an honor system. And then that form, if it's done by paper, will be brought before the county board of election in that area. And they will input the information as though that person is a citizen, whether they know it or not. They don't have the means to qualify citizenship at their level. And then if it's done electronically, the same thing. It'll be done and processed through the Bureau of Motor Vehicles based on information on file. Now, here's the kicker. It gets assigned a voter ID number regardless of whether it is a citizen or non-citizen. We just won't know that at the time. Then Secretary of State gets all of these voter registration applications, and then through the agreements with the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, which is a private franchise, they have some basis to confirm whether the Social Security number matches, the driver's license matches, and so on. But all of that occurs after some records already been brought onto the voter rolls, and that means they're going to be there for 4 years. Up until the time that President Trump was in office, there was nothing they could do about it. Which is why we had non-citizens that we identified having been registered. We weren't able to see the entirety of that qualified for the 8 million registered voters in Ohio because we didn't have access to the federal DHS databases where this information on citizenship resided. And we had to do single query searches for $1.50. Every search cost us $1.50, and the Biden administration was making states pay for those searches. Now with President Trump, essentially those databases have been opened up and given to states like that want that information. So there's a better approach now to do that. But you know that the problem is here, we're doing the same mistake with this resolution, just to go back to this resolution on voter ID that we did back in 2022. Do you all remember we had a constitutional ballot amendment that year that said only U.S. citizens should vote in Ohio elections, and it passed with 77% of the vote? We did not require a statute or a law to accompany that constitutional amendment. And when that election at the time ended, no legislature ever came back and wrote a law to codify, enforce, and implement the only U.S. citizen constitutional ballot amendment. How is that any different from this resolution here in what we're doing? Instead, what's even more egregious is back then there was no law sitting in any committee ready to be conjoined to that constitutional amendment. But this time around, there is a law called HB 577. And all the General Government Committee under Matt Huffman has to do is pass it now with this resolution cleaned up a little bit. And by this November, we will have 100% photo ID. If Matt Huffman does not do that, along with these committee members, they are derelict of their duties. And the same thing I would say with the Senate President, Rob McCauley, who needs to introduce an equivalent version of HB 577. And I will not let them live this down if they don't do this by the time they say they're going to do this in mid-June. My voice and other voices are only going to grow louder because this has been my movement for 3 years. Okay? I didn't win Secretary of State, but I didn't run for Secretary of State to be somebody. I ran for Secretary of State to achieve outcomes like this. And if I wasn't going to get the nomination because the state party didn't want it, and they did things to ensure that that didn't happen, and the county parties were in on that, that's fine. They can have their guy. It wasn't about me being a titled person. It was about achieving stuff like this. And so I'm very happy where I am, calling this out, making this voice, because Ohioans need somebody like me. They need 1,000 me's, 1,000 Jonathan Broadbents, 1,000 Joe Millers, making the case every day. So they have about 5 weeks to do something right about this and make this right. And if they don't, we will cross that bridge on what we're going to do and how we're going to posture ourselves for the November election.
Well, I got you. All right, very
Joe,
good.
Can I add something to that?
Go ahead.
I don't know how much time we've got with this segment here, but while we've got Marcell on, Marcell brings up a very good point. I'm among those people that I had to go through some period of heartbreak that Marcell wasn't elected to our state Secretary of State. I was pulling for him. I was really hoping that you, and I felt very good about your chances. It's unfortunate, but two things kind of at once. One is I'm one of those people that's of the opinion that wherever I am, I'm there because that's where God wants me, and I work to serve God's will. That's just me. That's my perspective. But more to the point, or equally to the point, there are people that I follow and am friends with throughout the Republican Party nationally, some of them deep behind enemy lines in very far left, ultra progressive, liberal, whatever you want to call it, who do this thing that I extremely admire, which is constantly and consistently running Republican candidates, even in areas where they know they can't win, because it gives them a platform, it gives them a voice, it gets them in front of people, it gets the message out, and little by little, you actually see some movement. I think that, in my view, and I don't mean to project on Marcell Strbich, but in my view, I personally came to the conclusion that Marcell is where God wants him, and he has this voice. He now has the following from having run to be able to impact things like this, and frankly, may have more impact not being entangled with the cabal in Columbus. So kudos to you. I applaud you for staying in the fight and taking this to the American audience to get things like this ridiculous charade out into the public view.
Yeah, I'll second that too, because sometimes you can do more on the outside than you can on the inside. You don't have to play all the bureaucratic games and everything with everybody, and you just be yourself. You can do more. That's kind of what we're trying to do with the grassroots, trying to do with some of these podcasting and all that kind of stuff too. Is kind of from the outside we can say we can look at this stuff more objectively, and especially this constitutional amendment here on voter ID, and say, hey, this has got some problems. And anybody with any common sense knows that whether you're doing a write-in ballot or you're going in person, the criteria has to be the same. You can't have two different types of criteria, and it's got to show a photo ID, and you got to show your signature and all that kind of stuff. And this constitutional amendment doesn't do that. You got a last word for us here? And again, great having you on. We're always enjoy your insight and everything.
Well, thanks. If anyone wants to join me in Columbus on Wednesday at 10 a.m., I think it's room 114. There's going to be proponent and opponent testimony. I wish I was giving proponent testimony for this, but I can't because of what I explained tonight is the problem with the language that was drawn up. So I'll be there with other patriots who will do, you can do written testimony. You don't have to come and present like me in person. I'm becoming a regular offender up there because of nonsense like this, but I'll do it again because that's what I feel obligated, is my duty. And I'll go up there and I'll give verbal testimony with others to the General Government Committee. And I would invite anybody to do that, right? Get involved, put your name on that. They do look at how many people do submit a type of testimony, and it kind of gives them an indication of of the passion that people have about these things, and they do consider it. It's not too late for them to fix this. It really isn't. And if they do, and they do a good job in just simplifying it and doing what Rep. Ron Ferguson has put forward in HB 577, I'll be their biggest cheerleader. I've told them that, and I'll be the most supportive guy going into the November ballot. But I'm not going to do it if they don't demonstrate their words through actions. I'm an action person, and that's how I judge politicians and elected officials or would-be elected officials, by their deeds. I don't judge them by their words. And we're just going to keep it up. You can follow my stuff on this at Marcell Strbich on X, 2 L's and STRBICH, and I still kept my Facebook account there, 77-some thousand followers, Marcell Strbich for Ohio. And
you got that many followers? 77,000?
Yeah, I did. Remember, I
Wow.
procured a account there that people tried to say was something wrong about that, but that's not. I just have a voice for people out there that want real election integrity. So I'm going to keep it, and I'm going to continue to parry that message out as far as I can. Thanks for the opportunity to educate and inform the audience tonight.
Hey, thanks a lot, Marcell. Appreciate you coming on
Marcell.
late notice like that. I think I asked you today to come on. So thanks again. Appreciate it. Very good. Thank you. And great job. Hey, what's a Trump endorsement worth, guys? I do want to bring this to our attention here because congratulations to Derek Marin. Trump is saying that it is my great honor, this is Trump speaking here off of Truth Social, to endorse America First Patriot Derek Marin, who is running to represent the wonderful people of the Ohio 9th Congressional District. Derek is running against a radical left Democrat career politician named Marcy Kaptur. Tried to raise taxes by over $4 trillion and voted against all of our tax cuts, including no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime. Marcy Kaptur wants to abolish our borders, stop deporting criminal aliens, and supports dangerous soft-on-crime policies like cashless bail that let repeat violent criminals roam free on our streets. And she voted to allow men in women's sports. And she's in favor of the transgender mutilization of children and voted against voter ID, but in favor of allowing illegal aliens to vote in our sacred elections. She is reckless, she is radical, and she is dangerous. And, hey, when you get an endorsement from Trump, that means a lot. Look at this here to show you how much it means. Trump's primary power. So he has endorsed 8 candidates in the Senate. All 8 of them won. He endorsed 98 in the House, and all 98 have won, and he's endorsed 8 governors in the primaries, and all 8 have won. That's pretty good. That's a pretty good record right there. So a Trump endorsement is worth a lot.
Thomas Massey is not too happy these days, I'm sure.
Yeah, Thomas Massey, he's crying a lot. Yeah, and Lauren Boebert, she's going to be next. She's in the House. They're gonna try to get rid of her, I think. Also, word on the street is that they want to get rid of who's that lady from Alaska, Murkowski?
Lisa Murkowski.
They want to get rid of Lisa Murkowski. Yeah, that's a big one. John Cornyn is huge. Now Cornyn, I don't know if you've been following that at all. That's Texas. He's a Rhino, Texas senator, and Trump's going to hit him hard. Now John Thune is a senator from South Dakota. He is the Senate Majority Leader, but he's not getting that Save America bill passed. Not doing anything. As a matter of fact, when you scrutinize, and this is the thing, as citizens like us, we never really paid attention to what the Senate did. We never really had eyeballs on them or anything. But now with X and a lot of the social media and stuff, we're keeping an eye on them. They don't do anything. I mean, these guys are so freaking lazy. It's unconscionable. They are on vacation again for another 12 days or something. They are actually on vacation more than they're actually physically there working. All right, and it's to their doing. They make up their own schedules and everything. But
I've got a question for you and Jonathan. What do you think about these big omnibus bills that are so huge? You may like 90%, but you don't like 10% of it. But if you don't vote for it, you're considered the worst thing going. So do you know why they do that? Why don't they just break up these bills? Why just have one big bill?
Yeah.
What's that, Jonathan?
Political entrapment. I'm completely opposed to them. These, when you're talking about a bill, like should we, the issue that Marcell Strbich was just on talking about, what commonly happens in politics in Columbus, Ohio, and other state capitals, and in Washington, D.C., is that issue, maybe it doesn't pass. Maybe it doesn't come out of committee, and people realize, they wake up and they're like, oh, people don't actually want this. We don't want this in our state constitution. But maybe you have some big money backers who really, really want the thing. These types of really nasty, harmful things end up getting rolled into a massive, like 4,000 or 5,000 page bill called an omnibus. And then typically, or often, the whole thing isn't actually given to the people who are supposed to analyze it and vote on it until 1 or 2 days before. So suddenly you're faced with like a 4,000 page thing that really is maybe hundreds of different issues and topics and bills and pieces of legislation all rolled into a 4,000 page thing, and you have to vote yes or no. What ends up, and the reason I said political entrapment, is because often there may be a whole bunch of really bad things in there, but then they'll put in something that is pretty clear cut. I mean, should we continue to fund the Rape Crisis Center in Omaha, Nebraska or something? And then if you vote no, because it opens the borders or continues to fund USAID or whatever, something else, somewhere else in the bill, then what politicians will do with the help of their news media is say, can you believe it? They voted no against funding the Rape Crisis Center in Omaha, Nebraska. That's technically true, but what it's the reason for that is clear cut. So what needs to happen, what absolutely should happen, is getting back to one bill at a time. So the Rape Crisis Center funding in Omaha, Nebraska is a standalone thing. And people come in and talk about it. And they talk about how much should it be funded, and then they vote on that. And then it's clear. Their voting record becomes clear going forward. Rolling them all in, and we saw it with Obamacare, that was kind of a standalone, but it was so complicated that it was like 4,000 or 5,000 pages. And the key that came out of that nasty debacle was that expression from Nancy Pelosi, who said, you've got to vote on it to figure out what's in it. That is pure madness. We have a representative government for a reason, and we're sending people, hopefully competent people, which occasionally does happen in spite of the uniparty cabal. These competent people, we're expecting them to go and pour through these things and gain understanding. If they don't have understanding, tap resources that you have to unpack it and gain understanding, and then vote in favor or in opposition. This whole idea of here's 100 bills, and you have tomorrow morning you're going to vote on yes or no on the whole thing, is awful. It is
nobody really spends the time to read it. One other thing I'm going to throw out there, because I'm hopeful for it. You're talking about the endorsement of Derek Merrin, and congrats, Derek Merrin. I'll be watching that race closely. I know some people in that Toledo, Sandusky area, and I think they're gearing up now to launch and run a really good race and hopefully get rid of her. She's terrible for that area. But speaking of which, there is, in my book, a similar environment in the Akron area. And we have now Kerry Coleman, who is running as a Republican. He is running on the Republican ticket to unseat Amelia Sykes, and waiting with bated breath to see what additional endorsements come in and what sorts of support go there. I happen to think that's a winnable race, because I think Amelia Sykes, to the south of me in the Akron area, that's Summit, Stark County, that area, I think Amelia Sykes is vulnerable. I think that there's a few points, I think, in her favor on paper, but I really think she is very disliked in that area, even on the Democrat side. So there are some races that are heating up in Ohio and really across the nation that should get pretty exciting. Yeah, and I talked to Kerry Coleman. We're going to try to get him on sometime very, very soon. I talk to him once in a while. Yeah, because he's close. He's in a race. it's about a 4 percentage point advantage for the Democrat, which is quite a bit. It's almost on that brink where it's almost like really getting kind of tough to beat. But yeah, anything could happen in that race. But they redrew the map. Unfortunately, it used to be about a 2.5% to 3%. Now it's at least 4%, maybe a little bit more in favor of the Democrats. So they didn't do them a favor redrawing that map at all.
Yeah, it was an interesting week. Jonathan invited me to the Geauga County Board of Elections. They were going to go over probationary ballots, and what was really contested was the auditor's race. Chuck Walder, who's the existing auditor, he lost by 4 votes to Mr. DuBois, and after they took a look at the provisional ballots, then there was no change. It's absolutely 4 votes, which was really quite interesting to me. But what was also interesting was there was a representative from the Secretary of State's office there to observe what was happening, and lady from the Board of Elections was all over his case, saying that she was really unhappy that some of these ballots that come in, because the post office doesn't do their job on a timely basis, and some of these people that turn in their ballots, their vote doesn't count because it comes after a certain cutoff date. And there was also a lady from the League of Women Voters that was arguing with the representative from the Secretary of State. So we've got it on video, and I'll try to put it together so we can listen to it next week. It was really fascinating to me.
Yeah, Brian and I sat there together in that County Board of Elections meeting. I was paying close attention to a number of things in the room. Most specifically, probably that 4-vote lead on the part of Joe DuBois, running to unseat sitting county auditor Chuck Walder. So, yeah, Brian's right. I mean, how wild is that? There were something like 67 provisional ballots, which means there were ballots that had question marks on them, and they had to be acknowledged and approved to be counted by the Board of Elections. Each one was looked at manually, and that all happened publicly on camera. They opened them up, etc. But to go through that, and each candidate got additional votes, but the final tally still ended up being a 4-vote difference in favor of Joe DuBois. I'm like, that's pretty interesting that's how it worked out. It will go in for an automatic recount, which means anytime a vote in Ohio is 0.05% within the final vote tally is that close, it's automatically recounted. That doesn't typically end up in any sort of difference, but they just want to make absolutely certain when you're talking about only a 4-vote difference. But Brian's right. The representative from LaRosa's office, from Frank LaRosa's office, he was an interesting character. He definitely held his own, and he wasn't putting up with any kind of nonsense. He had a couple of lefties going after him. And yes, I include the League of Women Voters in that because they've long ago lost my confidence in objectivity. So they seem to be advocating for anything and everything that opens the window to election season. And that both of them ultimately were really pushing and trying to drill for getting back to, or they were frustrated with ending that grace period. The grace period, by the way, means there was a period of days after the election was done where that county boards of elections were still accepting ballots. And that there are all kinds of vectors. Yeah,
all that kind of loophole stuff has got to stop. That's all got to stop, yeah.
But the point that I wanted to get to, and then I'll wrap up here, is that the gentleman from the Secretary of State's office, he wasn't taking any stuff. And I think the video will be entertaining for the audience. He was pushing back really hard, and he was making some pretty bold statements, which was kind of interesting to watch. And kind of liked it.
That's great. No, that's terrific. Well, I'm going to talk about one last thing, and then we'll call it a night. It's Memorial Day weekend and everything. I hope you guys are all enjoying it a lot. And Memorial Day weekend, so we remember those who gave their lives in service on Memorial Day. And Veterans Day is who's just everybody who's participated in a war in some capacity or something. Let me show you something here, though. This is something different. Jonathan and I, we did a podcast last week, but I want to show you a little bit about this accuracy in media, this Adam Goulet guy. And what this is about is Senate Bill 1. So you guys remember Senate Bill 1, which was to eradicate DEI in public colleges here in Ohio. Well, how good is it doing? He went undercover to find out what was exactly
Kent State
happening.
University is yet another university where we have found out that the lunatics
And he was on our show about a week ago or so.
are in charge of the asylum. And this department, we had an individual who not only bragged about continuing DEI practices, but who had some very strong opinions about white men.
As an openly gay woman who is from Rhode Island, who's from New England, we already established the New England side of it. Coming here was a culture shock.
Coming to Ohio was a big culture shock for... I don't know why Ohio wanted it.
I'm Adam Goulet, Accuracy in Media. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. We received a report that you were talking about how the DEI law in your university hasn't affected you at all, and how you're continuing to do the same things, essentially with different wording. Is that true?
I'm walking away from you.
Anyhow, he did a lot of undercover reporting. He would take a hidden camera, him or some of his staff, and they went to talk to Ohio University. They went to Ohio State University. They went to Kent State. That lady there was from Kent State. And it's all the same thing. You know, they're all saying, well, we don't do anything differently. We changed the name.
They've done
changed
some
the name
K
from,
through 12 also.
Yeah, they changed the name from DEI to belonging. That's apparently what a lot of the classes they changed. They changed it to belonging or something else.
I would think Senator Jerry Serino should be up in arms. Didn't he have the bill that prohibited DEI?
Yeah.
But they're still doing it. I'm saying, Jerry, let's get on the ball, Jerry. Let's
maybe Jerry will say that if they don't like it, they can just move to a different district.
That's true. They should move to another state.
Yeah, they should do something like that. But I think it's interesting because you don't see a lot of follow up like that, and there is no repercussions for doing it. Right now, that Senate Bill 1 doesn't enforce anything. There's no law.
It has no teeth.
It has zero teeth. Why the hell do you write a bill if it has no teeth? Why do you do that?
Right. You would think that they would, as we say, starve the beast, take away the money if they don't follow the law.
Well, they threatened
I thought that's what we were supposed to do.
They threatened to take away the money, but, I mean, it's such a lame threat, and it's like with Senate Bill 1, it really doesn't do anything. So there's another Senate bill that's coming along that somebody's proposing, but it's not getting out of committee yet, that says, we're going to enforce this, and here's what we're going to do. Boom, 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 boom as a penalty. But that hasn't been developed yet. It's still in committee. It's probably never going to get out. Teachers' union.
We're just saying, Jerry, step up, Jerry. Jerry Serino, step up and do your job, okay?
That's right.
Make them follow the law.
Step it up already, man.
Step up, Jerry.
Step it up.
Because I think we know that, the people that are the organizations that are funding people like House Speaker Huffman are teachers' unions, big pharma, and mega hospitals. The mega hospital and pharmacy I know a lot about through following Ohio Advocates for Medical Freedom. But it's my understanding, looking at the reports that were generated by Linda Harvey, who is a guest on this program and is a friend of mine through Protect Ohio Children. She did a big report a couple of years ago where that was pretty surprising. It was very eye-opening. Before that report, there was the general belief and understanding that teachers' unions that seem to just rake in $1 billion a minute or whatever. It's vast money. They are so overfunded, it's outrageous. And then they get these extreme, they're like supervillains that run these teachers' unions. But they fund a lot of Democrat politicians. We've known that for a long time. What's surprising in the state of Ohio and a few other places is how much money they're funneling into Republican candidates, and I'm air quoting that, many of them in my book, and this just goes back to Ohio rhino hunters and the effort to rebuild and fortify the Republican Party. Let's actually fill it with actual Republicans. That's another mantra. I'll get off my soapbox on that. But in Ohio, we have a lot of supposed Republicans who are funded by the teachers' unions. And so if these sorts of bills present themselves and the opportunity to actually fight back with teeth this time and oppose the DEI critical race theory nonsense and the social emotional learning and all those detrimental, terrible things that are destroying children and their future generation, there are people we know in Columbus who will oppose it on both sides of the aisle because they're bought and paid for.
Yeah, there's a lot of Republicans, they get their funding and stuff through the teachers union and stuff like that. I'm going to leave you with this last cut right here.
It's just so random.
Ultimately, it's just to keep white men in power.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what it's all about, right? Yeah. And if we dumb down education, then we can continue to do that.
She's going on and on. She hates white men. She absolutely
it's the white
despises white men.
That's what it is. The white men.
The white man.
Main problem in this
and indoctrinated
in Ohio.
For the white man, everything would be fine. Fine.
Yeah, I still keep going back. Like, look, lady, nobody cares about your sexuality. You're there to teach kids. Your sexuality, wearing it on your sleeve.
Plays a part into her teaching too. Don't forget the fact that she is an openly gay woman. Said that she came to Ohio and she can't understand. It was such a culture shock, and that's a cult. Listen, it was a culture shock going to Kent State University, which is super liberal. For her, it was a culture
as Jonathan
shock.
said, what is she teaching? Is she teaching math, science, or is she
apparently
teaching
she's teaching
gayness?
her ideology and her sexuality, because that for some people becomes so much a part of their personality that they cannot possibly think beyond it. And then they get into teaching. It's insanity. It's pure insanity. When we were growing up, and the way that teaching should work, if teaching is to be successful, any teacher that you have, and throughout most of history, if you could guess the teacher's sexuality or sexual preference or political ideology or political leaning, that teacher had failed. They are a failure if you can guess. They are there to open children's minds and expose them to a subject matter, and it's a curriculum. It has to do with if they're teaching biology or math or physics or a language, for heaven's sakes, stop obsessing over your own sense of identity with your sexuality and feeling like you're somehow some sort of victim in the freest nation on earth. No, lady, you're not a victim. The fact is, nobody cares. In Maine, Massachusetts, Ohio, California, South Dakota, or elsewhere, nobody actually cares. If you want to find people who will victimize you and actually will care, then just go to where the left is pointing you. Go to the Middle East and certain places where you will be stoned and abused. Here in America, you're free to do that, but stop thinking that that's a replacement for the education you're supposed to be giving the children who are paying what are they now? $40,000 a year, 60? I don't even know. That is ridiculous. If parents are bending over backward, they're remortgaging their houses and they're taking student loan debt so that kids can go there and be abused by your sense of being oppressed. It's all nonsense. Get back to education.
Yeah. These kids are coming out of there absolutely in debt and broke and everything because of it. All right, well, I guess we're going to wrap it up here tonight.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Jonathan.
See you guys. There she goes. There she goes. See you later.